Yesterday we had a discussion with Neil McCabe, who's a conservative blogger, has a website, a gun, pro-gun website, and he went off on this thing about how these guys keep shooting up these no-gun zones. And the Aurora killer, he drove by three theaters that allowed guns and went into one that explicitly didn't allow guns and shot it up. And it's no gun zones that are the problem, and we need to do away with the no gun zones, and we need to make sure everybody's armed. And this meme has taken hold in the right wingosphere really, really, really well, to the point that these guys can recite this stuff in their sleep. They know all of the mass shootings that occurred in no gun zones or near no gun zones, and et cetera, et cetera. And Timothy Johnson is a researcher over at Media Matters for America. MediaMatters.org is the website, which you hear me frequently recommend on the air. Great organization, and they do some really, really fine research. And Timothy has put together some fascinating research on this whole idea of these, no-gun zones and this meme that is being flogged by the gun industry's lobbying arm, the National Rifle Association. Timothy, welcome to the program.
Hi, Tom. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. So, how would you respond to what Neil had to say? Neil's not here to defend himself, but how would you respond to that point?
Sure, but I would say the idea that when you're talking about mass shooters, when you're talking generally, the idea that criminals or people who want to kill a lot of people pick where they commit their crimes based on whether guns can be carried or not is absurd. There's absolutely no evidence for it. You mentioned...
But wait a minute. Doesn't logic indicate if you're a bad guy with a gun and you want to use it and you want to hurt a lot of people, that you would want to go into a place where nobody else is going to be armed and whip out a gun and point it at you?
It just hasn't been seen in the calculus when this has been researched. For example, Mayors Against Illegal Guns, which is a gun violence prevention group, analyzed 62 mass shootings over the past few years and found that only 15% of the shooting occur in a public place where guns cannot be carried. And furthermore, you mentioned the Aurora Theater shooting. The idea that James Holmes picked that destination because of the gun policy comes from a conservative researcher named John Lott, who is known for his, debunked more guns, less crime hypothesis.
Right. We've had John on the program before.
Sure, and the thing is that he's posited that Holmes picked the theater because it did not allow guns, but he's actually offered no evidence that was the case. So, it might, I can see what you mean, where there might be a visceral logic to it, but if you look at the actual incidents for one reason or another, there's no reason to believe that places that do not allow guns are more dangerous. And I'll just offer one more example. Even though we've had over the past couple of years, some really horrific school shootings, if you look at the total number of homicides that occur at school where guns are typically not allowed, some people would like to change that, but typically, guns are not allowed in schools. So overall, the school is actually far, far safer environment for children than outside of the school, in the surrounding community, or even in their home.
Now, couldn't those statistics be skewed by high crime, high poverty areas? Of course, I guess there's high poverty schools, right?
Right. Even in a high crime, high poverty area, the school is going to be safer than the surrounding community, even if the school, is maybe more comparatively dangerous than schools in...
No, but that was my point.
Right.
If the local community is more dangerous, say 10 times more dangerous, whereas in a more middle-class neighborhood, the local community might actually be less dangerous than the school, in Newtown, for example. It's obviously a statistical anomaly.
Right.
But
overall, the Department of Justice, Bureau of Justice Statistics tracks this stuff, and in a typical year for homicides, you're usually looking at about 20 young people killed in primary and secondary schools a year. Usually in incidents that involve one death. Then outside the school, you're looking at a couple thousand kids each year, and I would say a lot of that is because the result of gun violence in this country. Our children are killed at just a much higher rate than other high-income places around the world.
Right. Now, the other canard that these guys always throw out, and this one's racially tinged, is Chicago has pretty strong gun laws, and yet there's all these kids killing each other in Chicago with illegal guns, and obviously what they mean is urban black kids. And what are the real numbers on that? What's really going on there?
Well, Chicago is an interesting case because it's one of the few places where it is a locality that is surrounded by a place with relatively weak gun laws. So one comparison that we make is that you look at New York City, which is one of the safest big cities in the world, and one advantage
even in the poor high crime areas.
Yeah, even so, like if you look at the number of homicides, it's comparatively low. And one advantage, New York and Chicago have very similar gun laws, but one advantage that New York has is that it is surrounded by states that also have strong gun laws. And research has shown that proximity, is a factor in gun trafficking. So you have a city like Chicago. The city may have, great gun laws, but it's an invisible barrier. Illinois has decent gun laws, but then, you really only have to go to a place like Gary, Indiana,
which is a 20-minute drive.
Yeah, where the gun laws are very loose, and actually, the ATF will track guns that are recovered in crimes, and sure enough, if you look at Chicago, a lot of the guns are coming from Indiana or other states in the Midwest that have weak laws.
Right.
So I'd say you can't look at it in a vacuum. And I would also add that fortunately, crime actually is going down in Chicago. The murder rate is obviously still way too high, but it is approaching lows that haven't been seen in decades, which is good, but not good enough.
Right. Well, and this is also symptomatic of other societal ills, of inequality in our society, of racism in our society, of there's a whole long list of problems that this is reflective of. These things don't happen in a vacuum. What do you think is the most common conservative canard or NRA? I don't even like using the word conservative because I use guns, and I'm not saying that all guns should be. My brother and I are both competitive shooters. I've never killed anything with a gun. I don't hunt or anything like that, but I don't have a problem with our having guns in general, in principle. But what's the most, in the minute we have left, what's the most common NRA canard out there that's just total nonsense?
I would say this has been on my mind since the recent shooting in California over the weekend. This idea that without guns, these types of things would still happen. They point to the fact that the killer in that case also stabbed people to death. So they say if it's not a gun, it's going to be something else. But if you actually look at an analysis of mass killings over the past few years, almost everybody who has wanted to kill a lot of people has only been successful when they have a gun. So I think, if not by gun, by some other means.
So there are other people who have tried to do mass killings with things other than guns? Unsuccessful?
Sure. There was a USA Today article. The only ones they could identify, the Boston bombings, and these are incidents 3 more people killed.
Right.
Boston bombings, like 1 instance of vehicular, 2 arsons, and then the rest of the incidents were guns. By far, if someone wants to kill a large number of people, they go to the gun.
Right. There you go. Timothy Johnson, MediaMatters.org. It's a brilliant piece. It's titled "Conservatives Misplaced Schadenfreude Over Robbery at Store with No Guns Sign." Well done, Timothy. Thank you for being with us.
All right. Thanks so much for having me.
Great speaking with you. We'll be back.